have the honor of introducing one of our clients who is going to speak today. But I first want to say, as Darnell mentioned, we first started working together with the Gilbert Family Foundation around our eviction work. And so together, the Gilbert Family Foundation and the city fund our right to counsel for eviction for tenants in the city of Detroit. And we serve thousands of tenants every year to help them prevent illegal and unfair evictions. One of those tenants is Janae Angelique, and she's here to tell her story today. She is a small business owner, she's a singer, she's a songwriter, and she first came in contact with Lakeshore when she had been served with a notice for a summons and complaint on a non-payment of rent case. I met Janae a few months ago, but I was familiar with her case for several months because while we were representing her in her eviction case, we got some contact in our eviction team from the landlord, and he'd reached out to both our director of our program and some of our funders to say that he was complaining about our program and saying that the place that she was living was perfect, that he would like to move his family into the unit. It was so great, and that our efforts were in fact ruining his business model, and he wasn't able to rent because we were causing such big problems. So of course, I was concerned about that. I didn't want that to be true, and I looked into it and checked out the file and talked to the lawyers who were doing the work, and not surprisingly, we weren't doing anything wrong. In fact, what we were doing was advocating in very appropriate ways for Ms. Angelique. So I'm going to let her talk about what that experience was like and her story. And so I welcome you and thank you for being here to share your story.
Good afternoon. So glad to be here, especially to sit and hear about all of the other amazing things that you all are doing as a collective to help everyone and people in situations where they need representation. My story, as Ashley said, is interesting because it did start off with a filing for a lack of payment for rent, which also turned out to be false because when I got the notice, I reached out to the management team and I said, hey, why am I receiving this? You know, the numbers don't look right. They looked through the ledger and found out that they had made a mistake. They had actually said that I hadn't paid for September and all. And of course I was like, well, did you lose my rent? Like I paid you $12.95. They had switched management teams, and the old management team did not allocate the funds, and the new management team allocated all of my funds on 1 month. So they ended up sending me a letter saying that I hadn't paid for the previous month. So what ended up being a mistake on their end ended up being a blessing on mine. Because when we did, in fact, go to court, the judge on our case had postponed the case until January. So in the meantime, I was put in like a breakout room where I met with Blythe, who is one of the attorneys with Lakeshore. And I ended up telling her about the mistake. And she said, yeah, because I don't see any kind of funds that you owe. Like there's nothing in front of us that says you owe anything. So upon telling her about the mistake, I ended up saying, yeah, you know, we've been having heating problems and we're having safety issues. And she asked me to explain. And I told her that as part of our lease, we were supposed to, as the tenants, be responsible for the utilities, and that during the winter, the landlord was supposed to be responsible for the heat. Well, free heat ended up being no heat. We were not provided heat. At the time that I spoke with Blythe, I explained everything to her. I said our back door does not latch and close. We are seeing like different incidents where people are running in and out of the building, children running in playing. We're seeing like things where you feel like people are squatting or like the homeless are coming in. And I kept bringing these issues to the management's attention and it was being ignored. Another thing that happened too was I ended up finding out that we had all been offered a master key, And this was because my son was also living in the unit down this hall from me, and his key opened my door and my key opened his door. So then I called management and I said, I think you gave us all master keys. And they're like, no, we think it just happened to you and your son. And so I said, well, do you think that it's more probable that just me and my son have the master key or that everybody does? So they came and found out that it was. And so we moved forward and we go to court, and Blythe had already instructed me, like, listen, do you have a thermostat in your apartment? I said, I do not. She said, well, if you can start taking temperature checks of what's going on and just start keeping records, that would be great. So I started doing that. So by the time we went to court for the first time in January, I had tracked 80 days worth of heat and the lack thereof. So at that point, there were 28 days where the heat was 65 to 68. There were 8 days where the heat was 68 and above. And then there were 44 days where the heat never got to 65 degrees. During the whole Christmas and New Year's, we had no heat at all. And mind you, these were like radiators. So if the boiler's off, it doesn't matter which way you turn that knob, you're not gonna have any access to heat. So when we went to court, not only was I told exactly what Ashley said, there's no problem in her building, she's lying, the owner stays there, we're gonna come to court, we're gonna prove that there's no problems. But the first time we went to court and Blythe mentioned to the other attorney representing them at the time that we were having heating issues, he basically told the judge that the issue was that the boiler was having issues in the whole building and that my apartment was the worst of it. So I don't know how he came about that information because I wasn't privy to that information at that time. But after that, they came in my apartment, put an electronic thermostat in, and they came for 1 week taking pictures of that thermostat, and they kept the heat on for that 1 week. And after that, they turned it off and they never came back and took another picture. But I did. I took pictures. I took temperature checks. I moved the thermostat to different rooms and let it stay in there and took pictures of that. And when we went back to court, not only did the landlord not show up, who supposedly lived in the building, but their attorney didn't even show up. And so they were sitting there without representation, and here I was with 3 lawyers representing me, and it felt like such a relief and a blessing, because to be in a situation like that, where you have someone lying on you and pretending like you're making it up, and all the while you're suffering, and you're trying to figure these things out. Like, for the record, the lowest tracking of heat, or the lack thereof, was 59.9 degrees in my apartment. And at that point, I was reaching out to Blythe and I was saying, where are we with everything? And she was like, they haven't submitted anything. They haven't asked for any discovery. They haven't done this. They haven't done that. But yet we were supplying everything. And it felt like such a blessing to me because I didn't have to worry about it. And there were other people in the building who were going through the same exact thing. And when I went to them like, hey, listen, I've got this great legal team. I've reached out to BC. The inspector came out. Here's the information. People were afraid. People were saying things to me like, well, I don't know, because I'm a little behind in my rent right now, so I don't want to come to court. I don't want to give testimony. I don't want to give an affidavit. I don't want to show up because I don't know what's going to happen. And what ended up happening was, and I know that they tell me I'm not supposed to say that I won my case because it was settled, but we settled up. And we did win. We did win. And they ended up having to settle because their lawyer showed up with, let me tell you about this. The lawyer that did not show up left this poor guy out to dry. This lawyer came in with no knowledge about anything, and I promise you, I was sitting there in the courtroom, and he walked in, and he didn't even have a briefcase. And I was like, what is he about to do? He's literally walking in here with no briefcase, and they came in unprepared, wanted to postpone it and adjourn it for a week, and I said, absolutely not. By this time, we had been to court 3 different times, and at this point, you had already lied on me. You had already provided me with no heat, which was a basic necessity, and I was like, no, and I was confident in my team because my team had been by my side the entire time, keeping me in the loop about what we were gonna do, what the game plan was, how we were gonna execute it, giving me the confidence that I need, and was like, listen, just keep track track of everything and keep moving. And what I was doing, I'm gonna tell you, it was really hard at times because, first of all, I had no radiator in my bedroom. So I spent the first 6 months living in sleeping in my living room because that's where I had the space heater. So getting up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and it's freezing in your bathroom and it's freezing everywhere else in your apartment, the thing that you want to do the most is just go back, get into that heat, put that blanket on, and lay back down. But no, I would go, let me go in this room, let me take this temperature check, let me use my phone, then let me write it down and log it, then let me go back to sleep. And I did that faithfully for 4.5 months. And like I said, we settled up, it was worth it. And now I'm here today as the face of victory, as the face of surviving, as the face of courage, because I'm gonna also share this with you. There are people who still stay in this building. And what we did find out during this case was not only did this person not have, what is it called, the letter of compliance to even lease, but they also, and I found this out from a tenant who is there now, standing in water in her tub, and her sink does not even let the water out either. She's up to her shins every time she takes a shower, and she found out that they opted out of the $200,000 plumbing that was supposed to happen in this building. When my son was moving out the same month, he came in, there was water coming down from the ceiling in the common area and water coming down from the common area going up the steps. Not to mention the week that I was leaving, a pipe burst in my closet. I wonder why. Probably because there was no heat. So with that being said, I'm so grateful, I'm so thankful for Lakeshore Legal Aid representing me, believing me, not being intimidated when they called you and said cease and desist from representing me, but instead said, no, we're gonna continue to stand, we're gonna continue to fight, we're gonna continue to advocate, we're gonna continue to do what we are commissioned to do, and standing by my side and representing me, because like I said, we won.